There are achievements that change a life. There are breakthroughs that shift a family's trajectory. And then there are those rare, consecrated, divinely timed moments, so extraordinary, so world-altering, that an entire nation holds its breath. You did not just accomplish something impressive. You stepped into a category that did not exist before you arrived. Watch this video all the way to the end, because every word of it is directly connected to what God is doing in your life right now. Drop your warmest wishes in the comments below. Write Amen and the number 99. There is power in a spoken declaration. There is momentum in agreement. And when a chosen one speaks from a place of faith rather than fear, something in the atmosphere responds. Like this video, subscribe if you have not yet, and let's begin. You did something no one else in your country has ever done. Let that truth sit with you for a moment. Not in pride, not in performance, but in genuine awe. Because this is not about ego, it is about evidence. Evidence that God placed something inside you. A design, a set of instincts, a direction that simply did not exist in the people standing around you. You were never supposed to follow the same path, operate on the same timeline, or submit to the same invisible ceiling that quietly governed everyone else. From the very beginning, there was a difference in you. It was not always recognized. It was not always applauded. There were stretches of time when that difference made you feel separated from the crowd, misread, even alone. But here is what you could not have known back then. That sense of not quite fitting was not a flaw. It was a fingerprint. The first quiet signature of divine assignment written on your life. You noticed it in small ways. Doors that swung open effortlessly for others felt irrelevant to your spirit. Conversations that satisfied people around you left you restless. Opportunities that everyone celebrated felt like wrong turns in your gut. You sensed something larger pulling at you. Something you could not yet name or fully see. That was not confusion. That was calling. And what you were carrying, that specific vision, that particular hunger, had no precedent in the environment you were standing in. No one around you had walked this road before you, because this road was yours to build. This message was made for you. Stay with me until the very end. When you finally moved, the reaction was immediate. Some people applauded. Others doubted openly. But the most telling response was silence. Not the absence of words. Silence louder than any criticism you could have received, because when people witness something they cannot categorize, they freeze. When they encounter a move they did not predict, they hesitate. When someone crosses a line, they themselves were too afraid to approach. They grow still and simply watch. That silence was not indifference. It was recognition struggling to form itself into language. Your achievement stunned people, not merely because it was impressive. It stunned them because it destabilized something they had quietly believed, that there were certain things someone from your background, your context, your country simply did not do. There are unspoken ceilings everywhere, cultural boundaries that feel as fixed as walls, even though they were never written into law. Quiet expectations that shape what people believe is possible for them and for you. You walked straight through one of those walls. And when you did not just change your own position, you changed the entire picture. You proved that limitation was a belief, not a law. You demonstrated that geography does not determine destiny, and somewhere beyond what human eyes could see, something celebrated the obedience that carried you to that moment. Here is something that people rarely talk about when they describe groundbreaking moments. They almost never feel groundbreaking while they are happening. They feel uncertain, they feel heavy, They feel like walking through fog with no guarantee that the path continues on the other side. You were not walking a red carpet toward your breakthrough. You were walking through resistance, through whispered doubts from people who cared about you, through raised eyebrows from people who doubted you, through your own internal voice that occasionally asked whether you had misread the whole thing. But something steadied you, not confidence in the traditional sense, not a guarantee that everything would work out. It was something quieter and more durable than that. It was a knowing, a deep, settled, unshakable sense that even if no one else understood the decision, you were not making it alone. God does not manufacture copies. He builds originals. And originals, by their very nature, disrupt systems that were built to reward repetition. Your move interrupted the cycle. It broke the rhythm of "this is how things are done," and replaced it with evidence that things can be done differently. That is not just success. That is a shift in narrative, and it is far more powerful than any headline could capture. There is a particular kind of courage that only awakens when a person has exhausted every desire to prove something to others. And what remains is pure, unfiltered purpose. That is the courage you stepped into. It was not reckless. It was not fueled by adrenaline or performance. It was deliberate. It moved slowly, steadily, from the inside out. It had been maturing in you for years, through seasons most people never saw. While the world eventually saw a public breakthrough, it did not see what came before it. It did not witness the nights when doubt was louder than direction. It did not see the quiet sacrifices, the comfort you gave up, the timelines you let go of, the version of your future you were willing to release in order to walk into the one being prepared for you. It did not see the mornings you chose faith over feeling, the afternoons you kept moving when stillness would have been easier, or the evenings you fell asleep trusting a plan you could not yet fully see. People were stunned by a moment. Heaven was marking a journey. When history records firsts, it tends to focus on the result. First to break this record. First to achieve that milestone. It reduces extraordinary human experience into a category. But heaven does not record it that way. Heaven records the surrender. Heaven marks the faith that kept breathing under pressure. Heaven honors the decision to move forward when comfort was available, and the easier path was clearly visible. That is what makes your story more than a statistic. It is not simply that you were first. It is that you were faithful. In the environment you came from, the culture around you, both spoken and unspoken, carried a particular set of expectations. There were things people like you were quietly expected to do, ceilings that were rarely named but deeply felt. Most people internalized those expectations. They built their lives within that invisible framework and perhaps never realized it was a framework at all. You sensed the framework, and rather than submitting to it, you outgrew it. That is not something that happens quickly. It was cultivated in silence. It was forged during rejection. It was refined in the long, difficult seasons when you felt completely misunderstood. When your vision seemed too large, your ambition seemed out of place. Your certainty seemed naive to the people watching from the outside. Each of those seasons was not a delay. Each one was a classroom, and you graduated from every single one. When you finally stepped forward, you did not just succeed personally. You exposed something. You revealed that the invisible ceiling, the one everyone had been respecting for so long, was never actually solid. It was belief, a shared agreement that had been mistaken for a war, and when one person dares to walk through it, the entire illusion shatters. That is what happened. Your breakthrough did not just celebrate your courage, it confronted everyone else's hesitation, not with mockery, not with judgment, but with undeniable proof that the line they feared was crossable. You are exactly where this message was meant to find you. Keep watching. There will always be people who prefer a simpler explanation for what you accomplished. They will credit timing. They will mention connections. They will say luck, and on the surface, they will sound reasonable. But beneath their explanation, most of them already sense that something does not quite add up. There was a precision to how things unfolded, a sequence, a grace, a set of doors that opened in an order too deliberate to be random. The timing was too exact. The alignment was too complete. The obstacles that could have stopped you somehow became the very things that prepared you. God orchestrates moments in ways that human logic cannot fully reverse engineer. He arranges circumstances according to a blueprint that was drawn long before the breakthrough became visible. And sometimes the evidence of that arrangement is so undeniable that even the most skeptical people in the room grow quiet. That quiet is not confusion. It is the reluctant acknowledgement that something beyond ordinary effort was at work. As you look back on what happened, do not read this as confirmation that you are finished. Being first is not a final destination. It is an open door, and you right now, in this season, are still standing in the threshold of something that has only just begun to reveal itself. Here is a truth worth sitting with. The pressure you experienced on the way to your breakthrough was never random punishment. It was deliberate preparation. Every season of uncertainty built your tolerance for ambiguity. Every rejection sharpened your discernment. Every moment of doubt that you walked through and did not collapse under was expanding the capacity inside you. Not just capacity for success, capacity to carry influence without losing yourself, capacity to hold visibility without being consumed by it, capacity to remain rooted while standing in places that feel nothing like the soil you grew up in. Many people achieve a moment. Very few develop the inner structure to sustain what comes after it, and that is where you stand now. Not just as someone who accomplished something remarkable, but as someone who was built to carry it forward. After the noise of the initial breakthrough faded, something became visible in you that actually unsettled people more than the achievement itself. Not celebration, not ego, not the dramatic reaction they expected. What they witnessed instead was steadiness, a calm, grounded presence that communicated something without words. This was not luck. This was alignment. Because when God elevates someone, the elevation does not arrive as chaos. It arrives with a stability that surprises even the person receiving it. You are not destabilized by your own success. You were anchored, and that anchor, that interior stillness, came directly from the journey you had walked long before recognition arrived. You had already learned, through the difficult years, how to trust something you could not always see. By the time the external world began affirming what God had been saying to you privately, you were already settled in it. That is not luck. That is preparation meeting its moment. Spaces that once had no room for you are now making room. People who once watched you with quiet doubt are now referencing you with quiet respect. Environments that once treated your ambition like a problem have begun to treat your presence like an asset. That shift is not about you proving something to people who needed convincing. It is about the simple, undeniable weight of obedience made visible. Your breakthrough also did something subtle and quietly powerful. It disrupted comparison. In cultures where people constantly measure themselves against each other and use those measurements to determine whether to move or stay, your decision did not compete within the existing scale. It changed the scale entirely. You were not trying to outperform the person beside you. You were operating from a different level of conviction altogether. And conviction, true, God-sourced, tested under fire conviction, is impossible to argue with. It can only be witnessed. There are people right now, in places you have never been, and conversations you have never entered, who are daring to dream bigger because of what you did. They may never meet you, they may never tell you, but your story is circulating as evidence, as proof. As the one answer to the most paralyzing question a person can ask themselves, has it ever been done before? Now the answer is yes. And that yes was spoken through your life, and yet through all of this, the breakthrough, the recognition, the shift in how the world relates to you. You carry a particular kind of humility that keeps you grounded, because you know the full story. You know the nights that were not celebrated. You know the fear that tried to speak over faith. You know the version of yourself that almost turned back. And the quiet, stubborn grace that refused to let you. That knowledge is not a burden. It is a compass. It keeps you honest about where your strength actually came from. Being first does not mean you are finished. It means you have opened something. And opening a door is not the same as walking through every room that door reveals. There are still dimensions of your calling that have not fully surfaced. There are still chapters in your story that have not been written. What stunned the nation was a milestone, not a conclusion. Because once you discover that one ceiling was breakable, you begin to see that all of them are. The same resilience that carried you to this point is the same resilience that will carry you further. It has not been spent, it has been proven. The most enduring part of your story is not just what you achieved. It is who you remained while achieving it. You did not distort your values to reach your destination. You did not trade your integrity for access. You did not become someone unrecognizable in order to open a door that would recognize you. You remained at your core, aligned with the person God shaped you to be through difficulty, through obscurity, through pressure, and through elevation. That consistency is extraordinary. And it is precisely that consistency that makes your story worth telling far beyond this moment. Before you leave, subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Drop a comment below. Write what you are believing God for right now, because there is someone watching this who needs to see your declaration. Your words carry weight. Your agreement creates momentum. As time continued to pass, something else happened. The impact of what you did stopped being a conversation and became a reference point. It stopped being news and became standard. What once required courage to imagine is now offered as evidence to someone else who is still in the imagining stage. Your name, whether you hear it or not, is being spoken in rooms you have never entered, as proof that what seems impossible is simply unexplored. That is the difference between achieving a goal and altering a standard. A goal is reached and celebrated and placed on a shelf. A standard is established and referenced and built upon by everyone who comes after. You built a standard. There are individuals who observed you quietly during the seasons before your breakthrough. They watched your discipline. They noticed your consistency. They observed your commitment to something they were not entirely sure would materialize. And then, when it did, when the invisible thing you had been building suddenly became undeniably visible, their doubt became astonishment. Not because the achievement itself was beyond comprehension, but because your persistence was. Because persistence at that level, sustained through that much uncertainty, reveals something about character that is genuinely rare. You did not stumble into history. You constructed the path to it, one inconvenient choice at a time. one quiet sacrifice at a time, through seasons when no one was watching and no one was applauding. And the only reason to keep going was the conviction that stopping was not an option your spirit was willing to entertain. When God calls someone to be first, He rarely announces it loudly. He rarely surrounds that person with a crowd of supporters who understand from the beginning. He places the calling in the interior, quiet, certain, persistent. And then He watches to see who will honor it when the exterior offers every reason not to. You honored it through the isolation of a vision no one around you could fully see. Through the loneliness of a standard no one around you had yet modeled. Through the ambiguity of a path that had no markers because no one had walked it before you. You moved anyway. God does not assign territory-breaking missions to those who require external validation before they will take a step. He assigns them to those who have learned through difficulty, through delay, through disappointment, that His voice is enough, that His timing is sufficient, that His presence is the only map they need when the road ahead is unmapped. You learned that not in comfort, but in the seasons most people never saw. The day that stunned the world was not a random event. It was a culmination. It was the moment when everything you had endured, survived, refined, and carried became visible to eyes that had not been present for the process. They saw the fruit. They did not see the root system, deep, established, long-suffering, that made the fruit possible. But you know the root. And that knowledge keeps you clear about what actually produced the moment they are still talking about. Here is what that means going forward. The same invisible work that produced your first breakthrough is the same work that will produce the next one. The discipline, the faith under pressure, the refusal to shrink to fit inside spaces that were too small, all of it continues. And it grows more effective, not less, with every season of faithfulness you add to it. You are not at the end of your story, you are at the point in the story where the reader begins to realize exactly what kind of story this is. Not a story about a lucky break, not a story about being in the right place at the right time, a story about someone who refused to accept the version of their future that their environment tried to hand them, and who, in refusing, created something that outlasts them. Your breakthrough did not just open a door, it rewrote the imagination of an entire generation of people who are still trying to figure out whether doors like that exist. They exist. You walked through one. And now, because you did, others do not have to believe on faith alone. They have evidence. They have your story. They have you. There was a version of your country, your context, your industry, your community that existed before you did what you did, and there is a version that exists after. You are the dividing line, not because you sought that position, but because obedience at the level you practiced, it always leaves a mark on the landscape it moves through. The truth beneath all of this is simple, not easy, but simple. You refuse to let what was inherited define what was possible. You refuse to confuse the boundaries of your environment with the boundaries of your calling. You refused when it would have been far more convenient to stop. And that refusal, that specific, faithful, costly refusal, is what altered history. What they saw when they were stunned was an outcome. What heaven recorded was an act of surrender so complete, so sustained, so costly, that the only appropriate response was to align the visible world with the invisible intention God had carried for your life from the beginning. You did something no one else in your country has done, and the world has not yet seen everything that means. The next chapter is already being written, not with noise, not with announcement, but in the quiet, faithful movements of someone who has already proven they know how to walk forward when the path is unclear. Keep walking. The same God who brought you to this moment is already working in the one ahead. This is not the ceiling. This is the floor.